I remember that when I was applying to schools for college, I applied to Miami University and University of Michigan, and I got a scholarship to both, and I got a full ride. I got the presidential scholarship here at Miami University, and my parents said, you know, that's a great school, and that's the place you should go. I had always been very good at math ever since I was a very young child. So through high school, I did well in trigonometry and calculus, and I came to Miami and I tested out of the first year 5-credit calculus course and got to take the 4-credit calculus course, and just kept taking math classes and kept doing well. And I think it came to be my sophomore, junior year, and I think my advisor said you have to choose a major, and it just seemed like a really obvious choice to choose math. I think my education at Miami was a great launching pad for my career. I graduated in 1992 with my bachelor's in math and statistics from Miami, and I applied to graduate schools at University of Michigan and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I decided to go do my master's and PhD at UNC Chapel Hill, which is a top 4 program, and I was able to do the coursework and succeed, so I think it prepared me very well for a very intense competitive environment. UNC Chapel Hill, their School of Public Health is one of the top 4 programs in the country, along with Harvard and Johns Hopkins and University of Washington in Seattle. So competitive, I mean, in the fact that you're getting the top students from around the world who want to study biostatistics, which is what I studied at UNC. So competitive meaning that you're there with the top people, and I was one of the top students. So, you know, my background and coursework at Miami prepared me to be able to do very well. Getting my PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill prepared me for, I've done several things since I graduated. I was a research assistant professor for a year. I worked a couple years in clinical trials at Bristol Myers Squibb. And then I worked 6 years in the Department of Biostatistics at the Harvard School of Public Health, doing epidemiologic and environmental health studies. And I'm currently the director of statistics for the TIMI study group, which is an academic research organization doing cardiovascular outcome clinical trials. And I lead a group of 9 statisticians. So I think I've done quite a lot since I left Miami 22 years ago. I remember my senior year at Miami. I was a math stat major, and I think it was in the fall, and one of my professors, I think it might have been Dr. Schaefer, said, "So what are you going to do with your life?" I was like, wow, I have to really start thinking about this. I'm only a few months away from graduation. So someone had suggested, well, have you thought about graduate school? Because I was a pretty good student in math, and I said, oh, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do. So I applied to biostatistics programs at Michigan and North Carolina. And I went down to North Carolina and visited the campus, and it was a beautiful place. And I talked to a couple professors, and this one professor named Dr. Cooper, and he mentioned a training grant. And I came back to Miami, and we happened to be walking down the hall, and Dr. Baylor pulled me aside, and he's like, "Oh, hey, how was your visit to North Carolina?" He was an alumni of North Carolina. That's where he did his doctorate as well. And I sat and I talked with him, and I said, yeah, I met this guy named Dr. Cooper, and he mentioned something about this training grant thing, and he's like, you should have been on the phone to him yesterday accepting that position. And it was the best advice I could have gotten, because that training grant then paid for all 4 years of my graduate school, gave me a stipend, gave me the opportunity to not have to work a job, to really focus on my studies. And it's just, I can't even measure how good of advice that was, and I was so glad that I took it. Networking and listening to your professor's advice is invaluable. Networking has been actually the primary way that I've gotten almost every one of my jobs since I graduated from Miami and North Carolina. I think every job that I applied to, I knew someone who had either graduated from a program that I was at, and that's how you get your foot in the door. So networking is an invaluable means of progressing in your career or even getting a job. A liberal arts education, I think, would give you a really broad base. You're not going to be completely just focused in on one area. I recently was talking with some clinicians at my group, and they were talking about how medical students now just aren't coming from biology or chemistry backgrounds, but they're coming in as music majors and theater majors. And so I think that a liberal arts background would give you a really broad range and maybe make you be a little more diverse and interesting to graduate schools or medical schools. My advice to a student in liberal arts would be to choose a major that they enjoy, because I think that if you do something that you enjoy, and then you're going to do it well, and I think that that's what is really important.